This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Hello, welcome to the programme. A truce between Israel and Hamas is not yet half a day old, but the deal itself may already be spawning new developments. There are reports coming through that Israeli Prime Minister Olmert will head to Egypt early next week for talks. The truce deal is likely to be on the agenda, along with captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, according to sources in Egypt and Israel. 9 hours have now passed since the truce came into force. That was at 6 a.m. Gaza time on Thursday. And we've now seen pictures of members of Islamic Jihad packing up their weapons. They had been one of the most reluctant to agree to a truce, but their masked fighters have now dismantled rocket launchers and taken weapons away to be stored. Islamic Jihad had been behind many of the rocket attacks from Gaza into Israel's towns. Correspondent David Chater is in the Israeli town of Sderot, and Ayman Mohyeddin is at the Gaza border town of Beit Hanun. We'll begin with his report.
A new day, a new chance, and quiet along Gaza's border with Israel. These open fields, once critical to Gaza's agriculture, for the past year have been the front lines of a war between Palestinian factions and Israel. It was a war Abu Marwan witnessed daily from his house. Showing me his bullet-riddled front door, he describes the darkest days of the past year.
The Israeli army stormed into home and took control of the rooftop and the basement. They destroyed everything in our home.
Hardly recognizable from the damage caused by the Israeli military, for Abu Marwan and his 66 relatives, this is home. 3 of his children are still in an Israeli jail following its last incursion in April. For over a year, they've been caged in their own house. Every move was either coordinated or monitored by the Israelis. They were ordered to put powerful floodlights that lit up their surrounding fields where Palestinian fighters fired rockets into southern Israel.
This dirt path where kids today are playing was also the same path used by the Israeli military over the past year whenever they were carrying out incursions into Beit Hanun, raiding the houses of people like Abu Marwan and the thousands of residents of the Beit Hanun area.
Where palm trees used to cast tall shadows for herders and their sheep, today Beit Hanun residents are walking across the raised land, closely watched by an Israeli spy balloon. Only a day ago, this casual stroll would have been hard to imagine. Anyone seen in these fields was often targeted, say its residents. But for now, it's safe, and that is what both sides want in the first phase of this truce. If it holds, borders will reopen, goods will enter, people will come and go freely. An Israeli soldier held for 2 years may be released, and the economic sanctions on a besieged people may be eased. And from what was once an Israeli sniper position, a Palestinian child can now look out over Beit Hanun's fields and dream of a better future. Ayman Mohyeddin, Al Jazeera, Beit Hanun.
Israeli tanks patrolling on the edge of the Gaza Strip as dusk fell on the final hours of the war of attrition. The hopes of so many on both sides of this border now hang in the balance. The Israeli Prime Minister is not alone in expressing fears it could be short-lived. Overnight, a vigil was held by members of the Israeli communities in the western Negev. Many remain friends with Palestinian families they got to know before the economic siege began to try and stop the barrage of rockets.
Minorities controlling everywhere, in this area as well. It's a group of people. The quantity is very, very small. Maybe you can count them by the thousands. And they will use this period of time to manufacture more weapons and to smuggle and so on.
As the children of Sderot began arriving at their heavily fortified schools 2 hours into the truce, nobody could quite believe whether the day would truly be free of the red color alerts and the sound of detonating rockets. I hope they don't send more onto us. I feel good. I hate Qassams. I don't believe that this agreement will hold. I'm not optimistic. So a mixture of hope and skepticism here today, but many will still be haunted by traumatic memories.
This is number 34 Maccabee Street, the last place in Sderot where the rocket landed. The family were preparing dinner at the time. They just made it into the shelter before the rocket hit.
The rocket smashed into their front garden, showering it with shrapnel and blowing out their windows. The red alert system, which gave them 15 seconds warning, saved their lives.
We heard the alert and we ran to the shelter. I am the last one in. As I enter, the blast closed the door on me. Glass broke and smell of gas all over. I don't believe in the ceasefire.
Every minute, every hour that's now passing, though, is beginning to feed the hopes of people here. They too can have a normal life, removing the fear that every kiss they exchange could be their last. David Chater, Al Jazeera, Sderot.
Well, let's just remind you of the truce deal, which was mediated by Egypt. Now it's split into 3 phases. Now, stage 1 is happening right now. It required all sides to halt military activity. That means no airstrikes or incursions by Israel and no rocket fire from Gaza. If that holds, Israel is obliged to start relaxing restrictions on the movement of goods to and from Gaza. And then the hope is that if both sides adhere to the initial stages, there can be talks on a prisoner exchange, including more than 10,000 Palestinians in Israeli jails and the captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit.
Israel's chief prisoner exchange negotiator, Ofer Dekel, will travel to Cairo next week to resume talks on a prisoner exchange deal that would bring kidnapped IDF soldier Gilad Shalit home. Meanwhile, Noam Shalit, the father of the kidnapped soldier, has finally lost the restraint that has characterized him throughout the long ordeal he's endured in the 2 years since his son was taken captive by Hamas. Talking to Channel 2 News last night, Shalit levelled blistering criticism at the government, even threatening to petition the High Court of Justice against its decision-making. Shalit charges that Prime Minister Olmert deceived him when he told him that any truce agreement would include Gilad's release. Shalit said the government has abandoned his son. We've learned our lesson from the tragedy of Ron Arad, said Noam Shalit, and we're trying to prevent it from repeating itself. Prime Minister Olmert is set to hold talks with Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak next Tuesday in Cairo. Olmert insists that Gilad Shalit's release is an integral part of the agreement reached with Hamas. Addressing a conference in Beit Yehoshua late yesterday, Olmert said every day he makes supreme efforts to bring Gilad Shalit home. Olmert thanked Egypt for its mediation in achieving a ceasefire and stressed that Israel has not negotiated with Hamas. Olmert told an Australian newspaper today that the ceasefire is Hamas's last chance to prevent a wide-scale Israeli military strike in Gaza. Well, turning now to the disturbances involving residents of the West Bank settlement of Yitzhar. At this hour, a group of Yitzhar residents are reportedly throwing stones, setting fire to cars and causing other serious damage to Palestinian property. Earlier in the day, 4 border policemen and 11 West Bank settlers were wounded in clashes at an illegal outpost near Yitzhar. The disturbances erupted when security forces posted evacuation orders for 2 illegal outposts near the West Bank settlement of Yitzhar. Several settlers were arrested after they locked police officers inside Yitzhar and punctured the tyres of their vehicles.
The ceasefire agreement in Gaza, as we will see in the report of Ziad al-Hassan, was not agreed on by Israel because of their mercy for the victims that may lose their lives if the military operation takes place, but rather because Israel does not want to pay such a high price for this military operation. The Israeli Prime Minister cannot afford to take such a risk right now. Let us watch the following report, which was originally broadcast on the Israeli Channel 10.
The Prime Minister has postponed the war in the south despite his many threats.
Their job is to make decisions.
It turned out that Israel has been postponing a confrontation in Gaza. Olmert has given a green light for the ceasefire agreement that was reached between Ehud Barak and Hamas. This agreement came after a multitude of threats by the Israeli leadership.
The situation in the south is at a critical point. We will not be deterred by any military operation, regardless of how much it will cost. Fighting by our forces is necessary and inevitable. We have not negotiated with Hamas, and we will not negotiate with them.
Later, it turned out that the Israeli objective was to put pressure on Hamas as a way to strengthen Israel's position. It turned out that Israel has been postponing a confrontation in Gaza. The Israeli position continued to be weak as Hamas missiles reached the Nureuz settlement. The Palestinians buried a child that was killed by an Israeli missile near Khan Yunis. The Israeli government listed the advantages of a ceasefire in Gaza, including the providing of security to the residents who live inside Gaza. It is possible that a deal can be made for the release of Shalit. Meanwhile, the Israeli army does not want to embark on a wide-scale operation. However, there are many disadvantages. Israel is not carrying out wide-scale military operations despite the Qassam missiles, thus encouraging Hamas. The international siege against Hamas will not hold and Hamas will be strengthened. The Egyptians will not succeed in stopping the smuggling of weapons to Gaza. Orders were given to the army to prepare the launch of a military operation in a short time if negotiations collapse. The Prime Minister said that all options are on the table.
All options are on the table. The latest news we have is that the Egyptians announced that a ceasefire agreement was reached and that it will start on Thursday. Regardless of whether the ceasefire agreement is implemented or not, it seems that Israel has failed in dealing with the situation in Gaza militarily, which explains why they went along with the ceasefire agreement. There are many things that one can say in this situation.
Of course, Israel has failed in Gaza, but this did not start now. It started with the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. The fact that Israel withdrew unilaterally without negotiating an agreement or making any conditions proves that its army can't enter Gaza and stay there. This is a strong point for Hamas, and it was the beginning of the Aqsa Intifada. If the occupation chooses to enter Gaza, then they have one of two choices. They can stay there, which has proven to be impossible, or they can carry out a wide-scale operation and leave Gaza. The question is, if the occupation carries out such an operation in Gaza and leaves, will it be able to eliminate Hamas and the resistance?
If this should happen, what will the result be?
What can it be? At the end of the day, the occupation knows that it is dealing with resistance organizations that have grassroots support. Even if the Israeli army enters Gaza and eliminates Hamas leaders, the occupation knows that it can't stay there and it will not be able to do what it wants. On the contrary, a stronger resistance will emerge and the resistance will have more Arab and international support following an Israeli incursion.
قال أسد الله خالد الحاكم الإقليمي لقندهار أن القوات الأفغانية وقوات
Asadullah Khalid, the governor of Kandahar, said that the Afghan forces and NATO have expelled Taliban extremists from the suburbs of Kandahar, killing and injuring hundreds of them. During a press conference, Asadullah said that an area located northwest Kandahar is now empty. The Afghan forces are combing the area for extremists who might be hiding in the homes of villagers. Meanwhile, a new American report revealed that the Afghan forces cannot carry out their duties despite the billions of dollars that were allocated to modernize them. The report warned the American Congress not to waste more money on security units that are unable to carry out their duties.
القوات الأفغانية عاجزة كلياً عن تولي مهامها بمفردها.
The Afghan forces are completely unable to carry out their missions independently. This conclusion was reached by the Government Accountability Office, which reiterated that the Afghan forces are not ready to operate without the support of the U.S. forces and NATO. The Afghan units lack manpower, training, and proper equipment to carry out security operations. The report said that only 2 out of the 105 Afghan army units are considered fully capable of carrying out security missions, and 36% of the units can carry out security missions only with the support of international forces. The rest of the army units are much less prepared. The police units are in even worse shape. There isn't one single unit that can carry out its missions independently.
مسؤولون أمنيون أمريكيون عزوا عجز القوات الأفغانية إلى عدم استعداد دول حلف الأطلسي لإرسال.
American security officials attributed the weakness of the Afghan forces to the unwillingness of NATO forces to send security trainers to unstable Afghan areas, and the fact that Washington has been focusing on the military operations in Iraq. The Pentagon designated more than $10 billion to support the Afghan forces for the next 6 years and increased the number of American soldiers to 32,000. The Pentagon confirmed that it will release a report on Afghanistan within weeks and rejected the conclusions of the Government Accountability Office's report, which warned that continued U.S. support to Afghan forces without a plan will cause the U.S. to lose more than $2 billion annually. سهام الزموش العربية.
خسائر تقدر بأكثر من $2 مليار سنويا. سهام الزموش العربية.
The deadline is here and the time has come to enter the areas which have long been controlled by armed groups in Iraq. After Operation Night's Assault in the cities of Basra and Sadr and Operation Mother of Two Springs in Mosul, Operation Promise of Peace has descended upon the city of Amara in southern Iraq. This operation is the latest stage of the government's imposition of the law, which includes the disarmament of cities like Amara. Ismat Tarabai reports.
The city of Amara is completely surrounded, and security measures have been intensified inside the city in preparation for Operation Promise of Peace. The Iraqi government's deadline for militias to surrender has expired, and as the countdown ended, Iraqi forces backed by U.S. forces launched the operation. The first step was to intensify army deployment in the city, followed by a raiding campaign, which rendered great gains. A large number of wanted individuals surrendered, and even a larger number of weapons were confiscated.
Intelligence sources informed us of weapons stored in this place, and thanks to God, we captured a very large amount of locally made explosive devices and mortar shells.
This photograph showing the gains made by the operation points to the calm that has taken over Amara. Operation Promise of Peace, which looms over the city, has prevented any clashes thus far. Many fighters preempted the operation by turning in their weapons and themselves to the security forces. Meanwhile, dozens of Al-Mahdi militia army members escaped to the border with Iran, leaving weapons behind, which are now in the government's custody. Unlike the 2 previous operations in Basra and Sadr, the surrendering of militants and weapons has been a smooth one. This might be an omen that peace will in fact prevail in Amara.
The difficult security fears in Iraq are only paralleled by the difficult human condition. Today, UNICEF called for providing aid to hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children refugees. 25 million euros are needed to help them go to school and receive medical attention. Since 2006, more than 850,000 Iraqi children have been forced to leave their homes, along with their families, escaping to various parts of the country. 5 years after the war on Iraq, about 50% of Iraqi children are not attending school. 20% of children in Iraq suffer from ongoing malnutrition. The visit by Charge d'Affaires of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, Michel Sisson, was met by pockets of public and unorganized protests in southern Lebanon. The protesters chanted slogans against U.S. and Israeli policies.
القائمة بأعمال السفارة الأمريكية في بيروت ميشيل سيسون إلى منطقة النبطية إلى حركة احتجاجية واسعة.
The surprise visit by Charge d'Affaires of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, Michel Sisson, to Nabatea was turned into a major protest when dozens of residents started to throw rocks at Sisson's motorcade while chanting anti-U.S. slogans. Sisson, on a tour of southern Lebanon, was meeting the deputy head of Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Abdullah Bitar. During the incident, Sisson was at Bitar's home in the town of Mayfadoun. Amidst the chanting and the cries of the protesters, U.S. secret agents quickly escorted Sisson out of Bitar's home and rushed her to a diplomatic car. The protesters surrounded Sisson's motorcade and inflicted damage to one of the diplomatic cars, which prompted the Lebanese internal security forces to dispatch a tow truck. According to incoming information, the U.S. Charge d'Affaires Michel Sisson was on a first-time tour to southern Lebanon and the area of Nabatea. While Sisson was in the middle of a lunch meeting with Bitar, dozens of protesters from the various villages around Mayfadoun gathered outside his home and chanted slogans, "Death to America" and "Death to Israel." The protesters gave Sisson 5 minutes to leave the area, prompting the U.S. Secret Service to take the necessary security measures in order to escort Sisson to safety. In addition, the Lebanese internal security forces arrived at the scene and quickly imposed a curfew in the area. Moreover, the local authority made a phone call to the head of internal security forces, Southern Command, Colonel Mundir al-Ayubi, and to the head of Hezbollah Communication Division, Wafiq Safa, to help arrange a safe exit for Sisson. However, as soon as Sisson was escorted out of Bitar's home and rushed to a diplomatic car, the protesters followed and hurled rocks at the motorcade. The protesters surrounded a diplomatic car that was carrying a U.S. official, who was immediately transferred by secret agents to another car. Then, the motorcade headed to Beirut, cutting Sisson's visit to Nabatea short. As soon as Sisson left the area, the protesters surrounded the home of Abdullah Bitar and chanted slogans against him and demanded that he leave town. The protesters also pointed in the direction of many local homes that were damaged during the Israeli aggression on Lebanon in June of 2006. They also said Bitar's garden contained some of the cluster bombs that were dropped by Israeli warplanes during the aggression. During her surprise visit to the area of Nabatea, Sisson stopped at the city council in Haboush and held talks with Mayor Samia Halal. Sisson and Halal discussed several projects that are being funded by the American Development Regional Institution. Sisson also met with the head of Progress for Women's Institution, Salma Ali Ahmed, who gave her a tour of the center. The U.S. top diplomat also visited the Kafr Roman School and met with Superintendent Habib Zurket, who gave her an orientation of the school, including the computer programming center that is being funded by the Mercy Corps institution. Sisson visited the Kamal Yusuf Jabr Cultural and Social Institution in Nabatea, where the head of programs, Maria Asi, gave a speech on the various activities of the center. Sisson also visited the library, the computer lab, and the language divisions in the center.
حيث استمعت من مديرة البرامج ماريا عاصي عن النشاطات التي يقوم بها المركز وجالت في مكتبته وأقسام الكمبيوتر وتعلم اللغات.
أهلا بكم من جديد. أظهرت الاتصالات التي يجريها في لبنان كل من رئيسي الجمهورية.
In Lebanon, the president and the prime minister have been communicating with various heads of the parliamentary blocs. Their exchanges indicate that the crisis of forming the government has reverted back to a complicated and potentially lengthy phase. According to sources in Beirut, nothing is expected to change in regards to forming the government, and all options are now possible, especially since anarchy is spreading from one area to the next.
ظل اللبنانيون يعدون حتى اليوم 200 تقريبا حتى انتهوا من الفراغ.
The Lebanese people waited for 200 days before the presidential void was filled. Today is the 24th day of the governmental void. Will they have to wait for another 200? According to observers, this is very likely to happen. Exchanges between the government supporters and the opposition show that the formation of the government has once again reverted to being complicated. This regression moved House Speaker Nabih Berri to call on everyone to expedite the formation of the government without getting stuck bickering about past issues that expand the divide and reinforce security tensions. Berri met with the Republic's President General Michel Suleiman at Baabda Palace. After their meeting, Berri said that it is disgraceful for the Lebanese people to ask for help after the election of General Suleiman as president, even if the help comes from a friend. According to Berri, the so-called ministerial portfolio after the Ta'if agreement is a Lebanese fantasy. He said that Lebanon today is threatened by sectarian strife, which raises apprehension about the future.
اللي بيقول لك انه الموضوع الامني بينحل امنيا فقط بيكون حكي.
Whoever says that the security situation can be resolved through security is incorrect. The solution lies in politics. We need to expedite the formation of the government. We should not get stuck bickering over past issues, politics, and leadership. Also, and this is very important, some people are trying to win the elections through the government's assistance. They should desist from this and not try to undermine one another.
من خلال الحكومة يطلعوا لي من هذه العملية.
Meanwhile, reactions have been stormy and ongoing after the political bomb was dropped by General Imad Michel Aoun. Aoun targeted the majority, leadership and government, as well as the assigned Prime Minister Fouad al-Sanyura. Aoun called on amending the privileges of the Prime Minister. Heads of the majority and some heads of the opposition viewed Aoun's statements as a political blow that will obstruct the formation of the government. They said that his talk threatens the concept of coexistence. The head of the executive committee of the Lebanese forces, Samir Ja'ja, said that Aoun is raising the ceiling of his demands as incited by the Amal movement and Hezbollah and in service of Syria.
At the end of the day, the government needs to be formed. Naturally, there aren't ministerial positions for everyone. Unfortunately, the crisis is a matter of allotment. For the government to be formed, someone will inevitably be disappointed.
Of importance was a statement made by one of the heads of the opposition. He said that the opposition will not wait long, giving Sanyura a deadline, the beginning of next week, before they take a new position. They might announce their withdrawal from the government and demand that Sanyura apologize, exerting pressure for the formation of a neutral government. And things go back to how they were. The Lebanese leaders are back to heavy artillery rhetoric, with each accusing the other of being responsible for creating the obstacles that are in the way of the government's formation.
What do Americans really need to see right now from the Middle East? That's the question we asked ourselves when we created Mosaic 7 years ago here at Link TV. Hi, I'm Jamal, Dajani, producer of Mosaic, World News from the Middle East. After 9/11, we knew America wasn't seeing the whole picture. There was another side to the story that wasn't making it onto the nightly news. Here at Link TV, we knew we had to bring that other perspective of the Middle East to all Americans. That's why we launched Mosaic. But could anyone watch? Could direct unedited news reports garner an audience? It was a risk. Now with several million viewers, another million online this year, and a Peabody Award, we know it was a risk worth taking. If you value what Mosaic brings you, then call the number on your screen, 1-866-485-8848 right now, or log on to linktv.org to show your support today. Show your commitment to getting a broader look at the news. This program couldn't be made anywhere else. Here, we're not driven by turning a profit, so we can show you news reports that aren't whitewashed or censored. Reports that reveal the uncomfortable reality of the Iraq war, and news analysis in the Mosaic intelligence report that won't pull any punches. Here we honor your intelligence to figure out what's really going on. We now ask you to honor our work by supporting Mosaic and Link TV. Call us right now at 1-866-485-8848 or log on to linktv.org to help keep this outpost of free speech alive. While you're there, check out our archive. It holds hundreds of episodes of both Mosaic and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, available completely free to everyone, students, journalists, or anyone who has ever asked themselves, what's the other side of that story? Then keep the other side of the story coming to you every day by making a donation to Link TV. It's easy. Just call 1-866-485-8848 or log on to linktv.org to help us continue our mission. Your call right now can have a huge impact on media that really matters. You can ensure that Mosaic continues bringing you the news you need. We cannot do it without you. Thank you.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.